Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is get our background on. I've got a 1-inch flat, and I'm going to grab a couple of browns. I want a dark brown and kind of a lighter brown with some white. And I'm just going to load them all on the brush. And then to make the wood grain, I want to pull down and kind of lift up, and lift up, and lift up. So I'm kind of like planting and then flicking. And I'm going to lighten that up just a little bit. So I'm going to come down here with just some white, kind of pull that all the way through, and lift up. Now the key with the wood grain is you don't want to overblend, so I don't want to keep going over a space repeatedly. I want to give it some wood grainy kind of texture. Pick up a little more brown here. Pull that up and in. So the browns that I'm using are something called bark brown, Venetian, red, burnt sienna, and then some white. If you start to get that kind of sputtery feel on your brush, it just means you don't have enough paint. So I can just come back into that space and lift right in, lift in. And the reason that I don't just stop is because if I stop, I'm going to leave a mark, and I don't want to leave a mark. I want it to look like they're flowing kind of into each other. So I've got a nice wood grain texture coming through. Students often ask if they need to paint around the edges. It depends. I feel it's kind of a personal choice, but it's totally up to you. It is nice for when you're done to be able to hang it on the wall and not have to worry about a frame. If you paint them, it's already ready to go. So yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So that would be step 1. After this is dry, then we're going to come back to step 2. Alright, so now we want to get our stencil on our canvas. So I'm using a pencil, and I want to make sure that I go all the way around on the inside and the outside first, and then I'm going to come in and get all these inner pieces. So I've actually already sketched it on there for us. It's kind of hard to see on the camera, but all the little pieces are in there. So now we're ready for the next step. So the first thing we want to do is we want to paint the very back area, and you can see these darker tones in here. That's where I've gone into the wreath on the back and done this next step that I'm going to show you. I am using a 1/4 inch angle brush, and I have some phthalo green and also some Mars black. And the way that I like to mix my colors is I'm going to come in and grab a little bit of this green, a little bit of this black, and then I'm going to pull some of that down on my brush. I'll kind of slide that off here. So now on the canvas, I want these places to have vines. So I'm going to come outside of my stencil, but I'm going to follow where that hole is right here. So I'm coming out with that tip, pulling it back in, and then just kind of lifting off. The angle brush is awesome because I can come out here and create a really nice fine line with that edge. You just want to make sure that the tip is always following you wherever you go and that you're not pushing it into something else. To add a little bit of contrast, I can also come in and grab some of the brown with a little bit of the green, and then maybe I want, let's see, maybe I want another twig that's coming in this direction. And I'm pulling it up and filling in the outside of the wreath as I go. And then maybe out here I want another. So I'm just going to keep kind of breaking that stencil barrier as I travel along. This is a perfect opportunity to put a nice twig in. Come out here with my brush and just follow that all the way through and kind of give it some color. Here's another really nice place. There's another opportunity for a nice little branch to kind of stick out there. Maybe one right here. Now a lot of this part we're not going to see, so if it looks a little odd, that is okay. Try not to do them all facing the same way. I kind of want a little bit of variation. Here's another good spot. Whenever you're dealing with twigs and branches, they tend to kind of go in and over each other, so feel free to pull some over other ones just for added texture. And I'm just going to keep going around the perimeter until I'm happy and it looks twiggy. If this process confuses you, there's nothing wrong with just simply filling in the entire stencil first and then coming along and putting some twigs in. Doesn't have to look perfect. Twigs are messy. So I'm using a couple different paints today because I really like Dick Blick's brand Blickrylic, and I also really like some of the Folkart paint. So I'm using the Folkart brown, and then the rest of the colors are from Blick. And I'm just using the student grade acrylics. If you look in the comments, I've got all the colors that I'm using listed for each step. And I think this is starting to look pretty good. I'm going to put in a couple more just kind of random branches hanging out. Let's see, we don't really have any over here or up here. Just kind of look for areas where one might look like it naturally flows, and then it's also nice to have them kind of crossing in places. Gives it a nice little more depth to that. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. So the next step will be up in just a second. All right, we're back. We've got it dry, and now we're going to add a little bit of a kind of a background noise in the middle before we add the candles. So what I'm going to use next is my angle brush again, but I'm also going to use something called floating medium. You don't have to use this. It makes it a little bit easier to create kind of a dark area where our candles will sit in. And then this needs to be lighter, so I just want to create a little bit of a drop shadow in there. If you don't have that, then I wouldn't use black. I would just use, you know, a dark brown. And then I'm going to wipe it off till I don't have a lot on my brush. So this is without the floating medium. And then I would come in and just kind of brush around and use my finger to disperse the color. That just creates a little bit of a drop shadow effect. And our candles will sit in there and they'll look nice and pretty, and then it'll be lighter up on top. Doesn't have to be a lot. You just want to make sure that it's, you know, got a little bit of contrast. Okay, that looks pretty good. I can bring it up a little bit on the sides depending on where my twigs are kind of sticking out, and I'm just going to brush a little bit up in that middle and use my finger to kind of push it around. I'm a finger painter. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Next step is we're going to put our candles on. If you were using the floating medium though, we could come in with the floating medium, and basically what that does is it makes it more of a clear color. So if I wanted to grab this really beautiful red, which is a burnt sienna by the way, and mix that in there, then I can pull this up and it's transparent, so it'll just disappear into that wood grain. Oh, looks like I wasn't completely dry. That's okay. I'll show you the magic trick. As long as the surface or the bottom is dry, you can just blot that mess away like it never happened in the first place. Alright, so I think I've dirtied that up enough. It looks pretty good. I'm going to rinse that off. And I don't have to wait for this to dry to go ahead and put the candle on, because I kind of want a little bit of that color to mix in with the white. So I'm going straight white on my brush. I'm going to wipe a little bit of it off so that I keep that really nice shape to the brush. And then I'm going to come in here, and I want to kind of off-center my candles. So I'm going to come up with one, and the next side, and then the next side I'm going to stop a little short and just make a little zag in there. I don't want a diagonal, I kind of want a dip. Okay? And there's one candle. I'm just going to push it down over that vine. Okay. And once it dries, we can do another coat just to make it a little brighter if you want. We're also going to add some more color to it in a little bit. I'm going to do 3 candles, so I'll have them all varying sizes, kind of sitting somewhat close together. And you know, maybe if this one's facing that way, then the next one can face this way, just so that they're not all the same area. I'm doing short strokes. I want it to look a little waxy, so I don't want it to look, you know, nice and pristine white. I want it to be a little muddy. And let's see, we've got one more do over here. I'm gonna make this one the tall one. Okay, so now we know where our candles are going to live. So now we're going to start adding greenery and branches and vines. And the first thing I want to add is we haven't played with our fan brush. So we're going to play with our fan brush. The fan brush is fun. There's lots of cool things you can do with it. But what I like doing with it the best is just making little sprays. So I can come in here, kind of bring one down, and just make some spray of green. And I'm just kind of going for it. Just want to get some green in on that wreath. I don't want to cover up all my holes, but you know, those of you who have taken my classes know that we have a green rule, and the green rule is if you mix green with yellow, you get bright green. If you mix green with white, you get mint. And in this case, we want a little bit of both. So I'm going to go ahead and mix a little bit of green and yellow and then bring it into my white. And dab it a little bit. I don't want it super saturated. And then I can come in and I'm just kind of making some sprays. So I start here, plant, move out this way, move out that way. Same thing down here, I can plant, move out that way, move out that way. And you can see that there's a layering effect happening now because I've got the darker green on the bottom, which was the first pass with the fan brush, and then I've got this lighter green now that's coming out. And once I get enough paint off, I can bring some of those really delicate sprays kind of off the wreath a little bit, and maybe into the wreath a little bit. Get some overflow. And this is really about aesthetic. Like, when you're not sure if you're done, just stop, kind of walk away for a minute and come back. See if there's anything else you need to do. If it looks good to you and you're like, I want to move on to the next level and see what that's going to look like, this would probably be a good place to do that. Alright, so we're going to pause and come back in just a minute. So I have blow dried this layer so that I maintain all my beautiful green strokes, and now I'm ready for the next layer. If we go back to our original, we see that all of those beautiful sprays are kind of hiding beneath layers of other greenery and vines and berries. So we're right on track. The great part about this is that if there's a part in here that you really love, you don't have to, you know, cover it up. This is kind of your play area. You can decide what you want to keep and what you don't. So as we go, just keep that in mind. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to actually put in some more vines on the top and intermix it with some really simple round brush leaves. So for my vines, I want to go lighter than I did on the background. So I'm going to go for this kind of cocoa color that I have over here. Let's see if I can bring this into the shot. So this lighter brown here, I'm going to go with that and some white and probably that beautiful burnt sienna. So I've got my cocoa, my red, and some white. And whenever I'm putting 3 colors on my brush, I always make sure I kind of pull some of that off. I like the variated tone that it gives me when I put it on the canvas. And in this, I don't have to follow the wreath now. So I can just come in and be like, okay, I want a vine here. And the vines that I'm making are approximately 2 to 3 inches long. They can be a little shorter. And then maybe, you know, here. I want them to overlap. I want them to go over holes. If you want that really nice fine edge, just make sure that that tip of your angle brush is pointing out. Come down here. I don't like to go so much in a line just because I want more of a varied feel. So then I can come down here and go over my candles. I can come over here, go over that way. This is kind of where you get to have fun and decide, what kind of wreath am I making today? Okay, so I've got a lot of light. I'm going to grab a little bit more of this burnt sienna. Come back in and over. This time I want to make some braids. So I am being a little more linear in my thought process. And I can still go outside of the wreath. Okay, I don't have a lot down here. Pull some in that way. Okay, and I think that looks pretty good. I can still see my background. I can still see the stencil, I can still see the layers of green, and now I can see all these little braided vines that are popping up over that area. I'm going to grab my round brush. I bought these brushes on Amazon. don't really like them, but they work. They only work for about 4 or 5 uses, and then all the bristles start falling out. So I think this is probably one of the last ones I have, but it works pretty good for these flowers, so we're going to go ahead and give it a shot. What I'm going to use is I'm going to use a little bit of yellow, green, and white. And if I want to make it look a little sagey, I can grab a little bit of this burnt sienna and bring that into the mix. These are yours though, so you decide what kind of colors you want to create. And then with my round brush, it's pretty full, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to go out this way and out this way and then pull that up. So I've gone out to the left, out to the right, and pulled that up. Out to the left, out to the right, and pulled that up. And same thing over here. I'm just going to put a couple there. Maybe a couple. You can also just go straight down and lift up. Straight down and lift up. 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 So there's lots of different ways you can make really pretty leaves with a round brush. And lift up. So in this area here, I think I'm going to save that for some berries and put, you know, maybe a sprig full of berries in this area. I'm going to add another couple little leaves down there. And then I've got my filbert. This also makes really cool flowers or leaves. So I'm going to grab some dark green and yellow and mix those two together. I've got a really vibrant green going. I'm going to grab a tiny bit of white and kind of leave that on the surface. I'm going to come over here, maybe kind of off a little bit, pull it in, pull it in, pull it in, and pull it in. At the end I can put a little middle. So I can do one over here, and that way, that way, that way, and that way. If you want to vary the tone, you can add a little bit of darker green. And then to overlap them, I can grab some yellow and some white and put a lighter one kind of right over the top of that leaf right there. And I don't want to cover up all my stuff, right? So I only want to put a few. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to put a couple, I'm going to put one right here. This way, this way. And I want a darker one. Right there. And maybe I want one right here. Okay, so that's looking good. I got a bunch of 3. I got 2 right there and 2 right there. So I'm still in that odd number range that I really like to be in. And I think now we're going to find something else to kind of fill it. Let's see. All right, so now we're gonna put some berries and some kind of decorative colors on here. This has been one of my favorite colors lately. It's called Berry Wine by Folkart. I really like it. It's got a deep kind of Bordeaux color to it. And I'm going to be using a small, kind of more detail-y brush. So after I grab it, I'm also going to dip it in some whites. So I've kind of got two different colors on there and they're both hanging out. And I'm just going to start stippling. Now if you notice with the white on there, it kind of creates its own little contrast, which is great. So I'm just going to repeat the process. And when you're doing a sprig of berries, you don't want them in a line. You want to be sporadic. So if you have difficulty kind of making sporadic things as you go, I like to take turns. So if I'm on this one and I'm noticing that it's, you know, looking a little linear, I can move over here and be like, oh, well, let me, you know, put a couple dots on this side, see how that looks. And then I can come back over and be like, oh, well, you know what, I think it was almost perfect. I just needed to fill in a couple spots. Up in there. And come down here. And go over other objects in your wreath. Maybe this one's kind of going off the edge. Put some over our candles. Pull it in this way. And to get that kind of swaggy look, I'm putting a lot kind of on the bottom and then moving it down, making it almost look grapevine-y, but not all the way. If it's too dark in a spot, grab some white. If it's too light, grab some of that beautiful berry wine color. Now almost all of them, these two are facing this way and this one's facing down. So I want to vary how they're, you know, kind of hanging out. And I want to do the same thing. That looks pretty good. Pretty balanced. Okay, I think I need a couple more just kind of hider vines. So I'm going to grab some of my beautiful berry and mix it with this cocoa color. And I'm just going to come in and kind of go over a couple areas. Maybe a little over my candles. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. And then the very last thing that I added were some more just kind of petals and greenery. So that part's kind of up to you as to how much more you want to put in it. You want to be careful to keep layering. And we don't have a lot of light layers, so let me grab a little bit of this color. So this is green, white, and a little bit of that berry color. And I'm just going to make some little pieces of greenery. So for that, I'm coming in and planting. And as I plant, I'm pulling back and just planting a little less each time I do that. So I can come up here and do that. I'm moving the tip of my brush. Just a little bit of green. A little bit of light color in there. I can come back in with my angle. Give it a little bit of a follow through. And then what's great about this is if you don't like it, you can cover it up. You want some light branches. Alright, so I'm going to let you play with it a little bit, get it to where you're happy. Then we're going to come back and do our candles and the inside of the wreath. Okay, I think I found a happy medium with mine, so I'm ready to move on to the next step. We're going to revisit our floating medium, but once again, this is something that you could do with your brush and then your finger just to kind of dissipate, but I want to add some light up here since we added, you know, some of the dark behind the candles. So I'm going to make sure I've got a really clean angle brush. And I'm going to grab some white as well as a little bit of yellow. Ran out of white on the wreath. So I've got a little bit of white, and I don't want that much. There's barely any on. I'm going to put that over by my pile. Grab some yellow. And pull that into my floating medium. Okay, then I can come in here and kind of brush it down. If I get it on the wreath, I can grab my towel and pull that off. But I just want to add a little bit of highlight at the top. And if you don't have floating medium, you can just use your finger. You don't want to go too thick. And then I'm just going to let it fade into that wood grain. I'm also going to grab my cloth and come over my wreath and just make sure that it's not covering up places I don't want it to. And I can use my finger to kind of push and pull with that light. Okay, once I've got that, then I'm going to grab my angle brush, or excuse me, fan brush. And I'm going to grab a little bit of yellow and green, a little bit of white, and kind of bounce that on my rag so it's not super saturated. And then I just want to bring some grains on the inside. And you know, you can brush. That's always nice. Just kind of make it look a little more cheery in there. over my candles. And also, you know, out here. Try to go both directions, so if I go this way first, I come back just to create a little more texture in what's happening with the wreath. All right, that's looking really good. So now we're going to take our angle brush and we're going to finish our candles. So the first thing we're going to need is some magenta. I really like the Blickrylic brand, but it is a tiny bit on the translucent side, so you can even mix it with the berry wine or use the berry wine in its place. Either way is fine. I'm actually going to use the berry wine to make the wick. So I'm going to come in a little bit where that dip is, pull it up, and when I pull it up, I'm pushing using my pinky for leverage and pulling up. So I'm not just stopping. I'm gradually just kind of lifting that area up. Okay, magenta and yellow make a really good orange, so I don't have to grab an orange. And I don't need that much either, so I'm going to grab some yellow and magenta and mix it a little bit and add just a tiny bit of white, and then somewhere where my palette is a little clean, make a little pile. And then I'm going to come in and kind of dip in and around where that wick is. And that should still be a little wet, so it'll all blend together. And then now I'm going to come grab some of my white. I don't want a lot of paint on my brush for this next step, so I'm going to wipe most of it off, and then I'm going to come in and kind of pull and push down, so I'm diffusing that line a little bit. And you don't, oops, that happens. You don't want a solid line, so you want to just make sure that you're kind of brushing it away. I'm not planting and moving. I'm brushing, just kind of lightly skimming that surface. And then I can, you know, fix this a little bit if it needs to, but those look pretty good so far. Okay, now we're gonna do the actual flame. So the first thing I need is my detail brush. I'm going to grab some of that orange magenta mixture that we made. I'm going to push down and lift. Push down and lift. I'm going to need a little bit of white in that mixture. Okay, push down and lift. Push down and lift, down and lift. So that's the inner part of the flame. It's going to need a little oomph. I'm grabbing a little bit of that berry wine, putting that in the very, very middle of that little piece. Now I can build the outer flame. So for the outer flame, I'm using yellow and white. They don't have to be fully mixed. And I'm going to start by pulling some of this paint off my brush so I've got a nicer edge. And then if I come into the base and up, I'm making teardrop shapes, and then I'm just going to hug that middle and repeat. Come in, pull up, and just hug. Now if it's a shorter candle, you know, it's going to have a shorter flame, so Don't worry if your flames aren't too big, especially since it's in a wreath. We don't want our wreath to catch on fire anyway. All right, you can add, you know, a little bit of light if you want. I don't like how that one strand isn't swooping, so I'm going to use my magic trick, a little bit of water. And I'm going to swoop it. There we go. And if it isn't white enough, you can always come back in with a little more white. Kind of add some texture to your flame, or maybe you want it a little, you know, a little more fiery. All right, and that is the end of the wreath tutorial. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment below. If you're one of my students, shoot me an email. I'm happy to help.